At the end of a triple header and before a 2-weekend break, we had the classic high-speed Monza race for the Italian Grand Prix, and it was pretty interesting. No surprise debut winner this time around, but interesting. And let's hit off this weekend's talking points with some chat about penalties again. Some people seem pretty annoyed by how they work, some a little less bothered, and we'll get into that. But first, let's just go over how this qualifying result transformed itself into this grid. Now, the funny thing is, after qualifying, journalists were all rushing to tweet out what they believed to be the final grid after penalties, and there was no particular agreement among them, perhaps demonstrating either the current system being slightly too complicated, or maybe them tripping up over their own haste. Who's to say? But actually, it's not super complicated. There were just a lot of penalties to get through. So let's go through them now. In order. Sonoda got a 10th place grid drop for accumulating 5 reprimands, and that soon became moot because Sonoda then got a 20th place grid drop for taking on 4 new engine elements, each worth 5 places because they were not the first of the illegal power unit changes of each of their elements. This 20 places is more than the 15th place grid drop needed to send him to the back, so his penalty is just back of the grid. Perez changed his 4th combustion engine, so a 10th place drop for him. Bottas changed 3 elements, leading to a 15th place drop. Verstappen changed to his 5th combustion engine for a 5th place drop. Hamilton reached his power unit limit across 4 components, that's a 40th place drop, so just like Sonoda, he's at the back of the grid. Sonoda then got a 3rd place grid drop for failing to slow under yellow flags, again pretty moot because he's already at the back of the grid. Carlos Sainz took 4 new elements, so that's back of the grid. Magnussen took 3 new elements of components he'd already breached, that's 15 places. Ocon took on a 5th combustion engine for a 5th place drop. Almost done, I promise. Schumacher took a 5th combustion engine for a 5th place drop. And then Schumacher took a couple of extra gearbox components, giving him an additional 10th place drop, so that's 15 places in total for Schumacher. So how did this all play out? Okay, well look, first of all, the back of the grid people, we can just ignore them for the moment. They'll be joining the back of the grid in the order they qualified once the actual numerical penalties have been sorted. So let's clear Sainz, Hamilton and Sonoda out of the way. Then we just see what the numerical penalties are going to be for the remaining drivers. So Verstappen, he's got a 5th place drop, so he drops from 2nd to 7th. Perez is going to go from 4th to 14th. Ocon from 11th to 16th. Bottas from 12th to 27th. And I know there aren't 27 slots, but this is sort of a temporary shuffling bit. Magnussen and Schumacher drop to 34th and 35th, just for the moment though, because now we have all of these gaps in the grid. And everyone's going to have to slide up so people can slot in and take their penalties. So everyone from Russell in 6th to Alonso in 10th can slide up until Verstappen can slot into his penalty position of 7th. Cool. And now we have another big gap. So everyone from De Vries to Stroll slot up and fill the places from 8th to 12th. And now we've run out of non-penalised people. So now the normally penalised people, Perez, Ocon, Bottas, Magnussen and Schumacher, they're all going to slide up into the 13th to 17th place grid slots. And then the back of the grid people fill out the final places in the order they qualified. So there we are. Yes, it did seem pretty complicated because we had to go through 9 people, and I can see why journos made a bit of a pig's ear of it. It does help, like we did, to be able to slide the names around and work through the algorithmic process of applying the penalties. But it does make sense in the way it flows out. It just gets messy when you've got 9 drivers sorting out all of their penalties. One thing to note, which is something Sean at the F1 Word said on the post-race discussion stream he had me on for, this isn't a very common occurrence, having such a flurry of penalties. Belgium and Italy are key parts of the season for getting in your new power unit parts for the end of the year. They're power tracks, there are some possibilities for overtaking, and you're setting yourself up for the remaining flyaways. Most of the time you'll just see drips and drops of penalties here and there. So is it a massive problem that occurs so often we need to rush to fix it? I don't know, maybe not. But I do agree it can appear complicated when this happens. And I agree that outside of maybe being complicated, it has 2 big negative effects. The first, we'll be watching qualifying knowing that the results they're fighting for with their hot laps are not actually the grid positions we're going to see on Sunday. And that's a little bit annoying. And it was particularly annoying at Monza, where basically all of the front runners bar Leclerc were penalised. So it was going to be an obvious Leclerc pole, barring any blunders by Ferrari. The second, sometimes people don't actually get the proper penalties accrued. For example, Magnussen had a 15 place penalty for using 3 extra components, but he actually started 3 places up on his qualifying position. Perez took a smaller penalty than was given him, a 9 place drop instead of a 10 place drop. Circumstance can diminish the penalty, especially if you're starting further down the grid, and a penalty encourages you to just chuck more engine parts at the car, blowing your limit as much as possible, because once you reach 15 places, you may as well go the whole hog. And this isn't really in the spirit of trying to limit people's power unit use, is it? Now, some might say we should just increase the power unit limit a bit, and maybe we should, but I'm going to run with the assumption that the sport really wants them to limit their use. It's an important part of cost saving and sustainability. So what alternatives are there? Well, you could limit power units under the cost cap, which they currently aren't. So the extra manufacture and use of power unit parts is hard limited by your spending allowance, and means taking on new engines will affect the entire operation. That's one way of doing it. And there was some talk of subtracting a percentage of points from teams or drivers every time an illegal unit is used, but that will start to get very complicated and means determining a champion is much harder. For example, Max could win the title at the next race in Singapore as it stands, and I'll get onto that in a little bit. But if a rule was in place that deducted points for extra engine use, if he takes an engine after Singapore after he'd won the title, that could bring Leclerc back into contention again at a later race, and that's complicated and annoying, and it means teams can't celebrate until all the technicalities have been taken off the table. I had a little thought about what I might do, and if I wanted to make an equal and effective deterrent from rinsing through all your power unit components, I would assign a race time penalty for every component used over the limit. So, if you have a 5-second penalty in the race, you have to take it in the pit stop, where the team just wait 5 seconds before working on the car. That. Now, I don't know what numbers would work best, but let's just say, for example, a 10-second penalty for every component used over the allowed limit. So instead of starting the race with a 5-place grid penalty, you start in your normal grid slot and have a 10-second time penalty that you will be facing later in the race. Again, it doesn't have to be 10 seconds, it could be more or less, depending on how much of an incentive you want to give the teams to make robust, reliable power unit parts. But the important part is it's always a proper penalty, and it's always equal no matter what team you are, where you start the race, how many other people take penalties, and they will accumulate properly. So you can't just change everything for free. Every component will be a penalty. And again, you just need to stick a graphic on the timing tower showing their penalty at the start of the race until they take it. Everyone on the grid starts in the grid slot they qualified in. Everyone knows the time penalties they need to overcome, and they can maybe adapt their strategy around it. It'll be fair, interesting, and a good incentive to make good engines. That's my little idea. What do you think about it? So that was my main point of discussion for Belgium, but I'm going to briefly go over a couple of things. And one is how we felt about the safety car finish, and two, a quick look at when Max can wrap up the title mathematically. So that end of race safety car then. A lot of people seem pretty unhappy with it, feeling that it brought the race to an anticlimactic finish and there should have been a red flag and a restart, or that things should have moved along more quickly to get one last racing lap in. So a couple of things. First, the race was absolutely won by Verstappen. He was 17 seconds ahead of Leclerc when the yellow flags came out for Ricciardo. Without Ricciardo's crash, the only action on track really was the battle for 8th and the battle for 13th. So Leclerc wasn't robbed of an opportunity to win organically. Secondly, it's important to note the race was run according to procedure. The stewards communicated with track staff about the state of Ricciardo's car. They tried to move it, but they couldn't and eventually had to call a tractor. There was no debris across the track, so the stewards felt it was suitable conditions for safety car running. And ultimately, there just wasn't time to get the track back to green flag running. If this had happened on lap 10, things would have been pretty identical. As it should be, really. We don't want race directors bending the way things are done on a whim for the sake of entertainment. That could never happen. This is editing me poking in to say the safety car did erroneously pick up Russell instead of Verstappen and went almost 3 laps before releasing Russell and 10 cars behind him to correctly pick up Verstappen, adding to the delay slightly. The one thing I will say though, and I've said this before, I don't really like tractors out on the track craning off cars while the racing cars are still running past, safety car or not. I know the stewards think it's safe and under control, but personally I'm not a fan, and for that reason only, I probably would have encouraged a red flag. Now, I think the question of whether they followed procedure is clear. They did. The follow-up question is, do we want to change what the codified procedure is in the case where safety car conditions occur in the last 5 or 6 laps of a race? Do we want the FIA to set up a system that encourages proper racing across the final laps? Now bear in mind, safety car finishes are very rare, so it's not something we need to worry about too much. But if you wanted to get green flag running to the end, you could simply automatically red flag the race instead of pulling a safety car if the race has, 5 laps left, something like that. Then you could also ban tyre changes under these specific red flag conditions and mandate a rolling restart. This way you get the equivalent of a safety car restart without all the laps wasted away and ending the race under suspension. Now, I don't care too much about this. Like I said, it's very rare, but if you wanted to do it, that would be the fair way of doing it, because it would be functionally identical to running a safety car with the ability to restart. Finally, let's have a quick look at the title race ahead. Currently, the gaps in the driver's title are as follows. So Verstappen has a 116-point advantage over Leclerc, his nearest rival. There are 6 races left: Singapore, Japan, USA, Mexico City, Sao Paulo and Abu Dhabi, all of which offer 26 points, except Brazil, which offers 34, because of the extra sprint race, which offers 8 points for a win. So the maximum amount of points available from the next 6 races is 164 points, which means Lewis Hamilton is mathematically out of contention, with a gap of 167 points. But the top 5 are all still in it, technically. However, after Singapore, there will only be 138 points up for grabs. So if Verstappen can pull a gap on Leclerc of 138 points or more, he will win. So we just subtract these existing gaps from 138, and we see Verstappen needs to outscore Leclerc by 22 points, and outscore Perez by 13 points, and outscore Russell by 6 points to win the title. So it's a bit of a big ask to achieve, but Singapore has high attrition, and Max winning with the others retiring is a possibility. Now, for Sainz to stay in it, he actually has to outscore Verstappen by 10 points in Singapore. So let's see how it all plays out, and maybe revisit this in 3 weeks after Marina Bay, if the title is still open. Thanks again for watching. Have a lovely 2 weekends off from F1. 6 races to go.